Were you taught evolution in school? Then you have John Scopes and the ACLU to thank. Hi, and welcome back to Monkeying Around with History. I'm your host, Dr. Monkey, and today we're talking about the Scopes monkey trial. Somehow the debate between science and religion is still raging on in this country, but one of the first collisions was in 1925 in this famous court battle. First, a little background. In 1859, Charles Darwin published his magnum opus on the origin of species. His theory of evolution and natural selection basically tossed creationism, the biblical account of how the world came to be, right out the window. According to Archbishop James Ussher, the Earth was created on the 23rd of October in 4004 BC, and that date kind of stuck. Biblical scholars said that the Earth was a mere 6,000 years old, and that every living creature was the product of intelligent design. But then Darwin busted in and basically committed blasphemy against the church, saying that the Earth was billions of years old and that intelligent design didn't exist. That's a real mic drop. A huge departure from creationist theory was in his rejection of the fixity of species. Basically, the Bible says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And he, as an all-powerful deity, also made all the animals. And those animals were the same animals we have today. Nothing changed. But some important scientists, like Jean-Baptiste Lamarck and eventually Darwin, said that the fixity of species was bogus. And Charles Lyell, considered the founder of modern geology, said that the Earth wasn't thousands, but millions of years old. Darwin used his research studying finches and all sorts of animals, and realized that over long periods of time, thousands and thousands of years, species could change. He said that this was because of natural selection, when the traits in population change because of the different reproductive successes of those traits. Yeah, I know, crazy stuff. And all of these theories that Darwin came up with have a lot of evidence on his side. Modern evolutionary theory now includes 4 different forces of evolution: mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and natural selection. Mutation, genetic drift, and gene flow all create genetic diversity, and natural selection acts on that diversity. That means that over time, populations will change and evolve. And in 1871, Darwin published his second book, The Descent of Man, and he said that, quote, "Man is descended from a hairy, tailed quadruped, probably arboreal in its habits, and an inhabitant of the Old World." We now know that this is pretty spot on. Humans have a clear primate ancestry, and at some point they had shared an ancestor with chimpanzees. Now, you can probably understand why the church wasn't too happy about this. Natural selection and evolution went against everything the Bible said. So, in 1925, Tennessee passed a law banning the teaching of evolution in schools. And a group called the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU for short, wasn't too happy about it. So they started looking for teachers that would go against this new law. And John Scopes, a science teacher, was up for the task. He, of course, started teaching and immediately got arrested. What followed was a series of spectacles that rendered this court case quite remarkable in many ways. First, it was so hot that they had to hold session outside. And hey, so much for the separation of church and state, because the judge started every session with a prayer. He wouldn't let scientists give expert testimony. And my favorite part of the trial? The defense attorney, Clarence Darrow, called up the prosecuting attorney, William Bryan, to testify as an expert witness on the Bible, calling into question his literal interpretations of the text. When asked about how the date of the biblical flood was determined, Bryan said, "I do not think about things I don't think about." Darrow replied, "Do you think about things you do think about?" Bryan said, "Well, sometimes." That's great lawyering right there. The trial ended after 8 days, and Scopes was found guilty. His sentence, a $100 fine. Bryan actually died 5 days after the trial ended. I guess he wasn't evolved enough to handle all the stress. Although Scopes officially lost the case, a lot of people saw this as a victory because it showed the ever-growing need for the separation of church and state. Terrifyingly, this Tennessee law banning the teaching of evolution wasn't overturned until 1967. That's less than 60 years ago. And some states today are still demanding that the biblical account of creation be given the same weight as evolutionary theory. That doesn't sound too outlandish. Why shouldn't two theories be given the same weight? But the thing is, creationism, or as it's now labeled, the intelligent design theory, just doesn't work. For a theory to be considered a valid theory, it has to be tested again and again. And evolution has been tested, is substantive and thorough, and understands complex processes like mutation and natural selection. Intelligent design theory, however, is far less comprehensive. Its supporters tout it as an absolute truth, when theories can't be treated that way. And honestly, it kind of just looks like religion trying to weasel its way into science and education unfairly. It's worth noting that today, the Catholic Church does accept that evolutionary processes occur, but this isn't the case across all denominations. So the lesson today is, don't mix science and religion. They're incompatible. And if you do, then almost 100 years later, some poor girl is going to have to play the judge in her high school production of Inherit the Wind, a play based on all these events. Dark times. Well, thanks for watching and for learning with me today about all the drama behind your science class. Stay tuned for next week's episode, but until then, I'm Dr. Monkey, signing off.